everybody for joining us today, and a happy Saturday. Hope your weekend is treating you well. I'm so excited to be here as a part of something new for the KdVS Foundation today through a partnership with IDefine, which is Kleefstra Syndrome, and SETBP1 Society. The KdVS Foundation welcomes you to our first in a series of webinars called It Takes a Village. This will occur the first Saturday of the month. Through this partnership, our wonderful communities will have the chance to share resources and join informative webinars that apply to our broader population. Today, we are excited to discuss with you IEPs, which I know is an important topic for nearly all of our families of school-age children. So I think you all are in for a real treat today. I'm Casey, and I will once again be your host today on behalf of the KdVS Syndrome Foundation. I am mom to Hudson, who is turning 11 in just a couple of weeks and was diagnosed with KdVS about 5 years ago. IEPs are definitely not new to our family, and I always take away something new anytime we talk about them. So I am especially interested in the call we're hosting today. Also, I'm honored to share the Zoom screen with an IEP expert named Rhyne for an educational session that's focused on grades pre-K through 4th grade. And we're going to get to know Kelly a lot more here in a moment, but I do want to say hi, Kelly, and give you a chance just to say hi quickly, and then I'll do a formal introduction in just a bit.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
We are so glad that you're here. A little bit of housekeeping before we jump in, and I do want to give you a little bit more of an overview on the partnership. So I want to thank all of you for the wonderful questions. I think we always have such a great participation from our families, and appreciate you submitting them ahead of time. It is always so helpful for our speakers. Please know that we will do our best to accept questions as we go. You do have a chat feature as well as a Q&A button, so you're welcome to post questions as they come to you, and if we can get to them, we'll do our best. Also, as a disclaimer, we want to focus on questions that are within the specialty of Rhyne, so let's really try to keep them to IEPs and IEP education. Also, it's important to keep in mind that Kelly is employed by her district, so she can't discuss how to fight districts. We really need to remember that she is legally bound by contract to represent her district, and we want to stay within the realm of what her expertise is. So we'll help fill those questions as we go, just to make sure that we're being mindful of that for you, Kelly. Also, this call is being recorded, and it will be shared afterwards via email and social media, so you can share it with your friends and family. So about the partnership, as I mentioned earlier, this is new territory for us, and I think we're all so excited to come together. What we're calling It Takes a Village is actually going to be a program full of useful, interesting, and fun events for families and caregivers and children diagnosed with these 3 rare genetic disorders. The program topics will be driven by what the families want. Potential programs will likely include musical therapy, sensory processing, and like what we're doing today, of course, IEPs. These volunteer-based nonprofits are all working so hard to find answers and expand research and just better understand the impact of their rare disorders on the health of the individuals they advocate for. And while doing all that and being volunteer-based organizations, it doesn't always leave a lot of extra time for other things and other focuses on important projects. So the goal here will be that we create a shared library of resources and educational content that each organization is able to offer on their website. By partnering together, we combine forces and expand the size of the team working on the shared project, and we can pull from each other's community-based knowledge to learn more and grow together. So the way we see it is when one of us progresses, we all win. So we're just thrilled about the way we've been able to partner, and so excited to bring you all more content over time. So let's dive in and get to know Kelly. I want to read some really awesome things about her, and then we're going to get into asking her questions and looking at her presentation today. Kelly is a special education teacher in Greenville, South Carolina, on the cusp of completing her 17th year as a teacher of exceptional learners. She received her bachelor's degree in special education from the College of Charleston. During her career, she's taught both middle and elementary school children, with the past 7 years having a concentration in early childhood development. Throughout her career, Kelly has twice been named Teacher of the Year by her colleagues for her exceptional work in developing not only her students, but also in developing deep relationships with her students, parents, and being a mentor for her peers and administrators. Kelly's personal upbringing has helped shape her career as she is the sister of Katie, who has Down syndrome. The relationship with her three sisters and parents has helped develop her lens in viewing the world and all of those in it. She is married to her college sweetheart, Jeff Rhyne, who is the co-founder and CEO of IDefine. Together, they have three children, Jackson 7, Griffin 6, and Ella 4. Ella has a dual diagnosis of Kleefstra Syndrome and autism, and she is the impetus for their family's involvement in and stewardship of IDefine. So Kelly, oh my gosh, I'm so excited you're here. Welcome to the call, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
So we are ready to just dive right in because you have so much to share with us, and we want to make sure that our families have time to ask questions. But so first I wanted to ask you, how did you become an expert in IEPs?
And I told my husband this, the word expert, it's odd hearing that with your name. So I've been teaching for 17 years. And I've taught kids in middle school, elementary school. In the past 7 years, I've loved teaching preschool students because I've loved starting their journey and trying to help the parents see that we're here to help, we're here to support you. And being a special education teacher has also given me that knowledge to help my daughter. So I went in understanding the process, understanding that everyone is there to help my child. But on the other end, it's helped me because being a parent, I understand what it's like to be sitting in that room with a bunch of professionals who are all there to talk about my daughter. It's emotional, it's raw. So I can give parents that support and let them feel it's not that intimidating. And I'm really hoping by the end of this webinar, everyone feels a little bit more prepared and a little less nervous to go into IEP meetings.
That is awesome. Yeah, that's amazing. And I think, again, just your experience in education and then your experience not only as a mother but a sister, it really is incredible and easy to see how that could shape the way you think about the world and make it so much more impactful. Can you also tell us, one of the things we always like to ask our speakers is, can you tell us a couple of fun facts about yourself that are kind of unrelated to IEPs?
Sure. First one is I met my husband in 2000. I think that dates me a little bit, but and we met at a restaurant that we both work for. He was making pizzas and I was waiting tables. The rest is history, but the funny part is the name of the restaurant was That's Amore. So I figure it's pretty fitting that we found love at That's Amore. And then the second fact I would say is I am terrified of speaking in public. So when my husband asked me to do this, it's a little nervous. I can walk into a room of 30 children and feel confident and excited, but it's a little different when there is adults. So if you see me looking down, I wrote some notes just in case I need to glance at them if I start to get off topic.
Well, you're absolutely crushing it so far. So for what it's worth, you seem like a natural. So no need to worry. One of the other, before we dive into your PowerPoint presentation and the bulk of the meeting, one of the things I did want to ask you about, we have a lot of people that will attend these calls where they're the parent, but then we also have a lot of people that attend these calls that are an aunt, a sibling, a grandparent. And so you have such an interesting perspective, not only as a mother and an educator, but also as a sibling. And so I'm just wondering too, if there might just be some advice that you could offer those extended family members and friends that maybe are watching and trying to think through, how can I support my friend or family member?
That's a great question. We get asked that all the time is how can we support you? What can we do? One of the big things is just providing a listening ear. Sometimes if you need to talk about struggles of becoming or of being a special needs parent, because as we all know, probably everyone in here, it can be isolating. And also including us, although sometimes we might have to say no, including us in everything, whether we can go, whether we can participate for 20 minutes, always including us. And as a sister, my sister is 2 years younger than me. So my parents have been amazing. I didn't realize how challenging life could be. It's making me emotional, but they have always made sure that, I'm sorry, that we have felt valued. And I feel that, and I've talked to a lot of other parents about that, that I feel that that is so important for siblings to understand their value as well.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. I so appreciate saying, because again, even as a mother, I watched this with my son has the syndrome, but then he has a younger sister. And so my husband and I are often talking about how can we do a better job of making sure that she feels her value too, and that she feels like she has time with us. And so, I mean, I think, and how do we support her as she grows up as a sibling to someone with different abilities? And so I really appreciate what you're saying. And I feel like that will really resonate with a lot of our families and friends of all three of our organizations. That those that are watching, I think it'll really resonate well with them. So thank you for sharing that. It'll
lead to another webinar of supporting siblings.
You're right. It's almost like we practiced that, because we do actually have a webinar about that scheduled in, I believe it's, Ashley can check me on this and maybe put it in the chat, but I believe it's in June.
I think so too.
Perfectly set it up. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and let me know if you can see that okay. And then let me put us in presenter view. That is not what we wanted. Hang on just a second, y'all. Give me 1 second. This is obviously pushing the limits this morning of my abilities. There we go. Okay, are we good there? Can you guys see that okay, Kelly?
I can.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm going to go on mute so that I'm not disruptive with my clicking, and you just feel free to tell me when you're ready for me to advance the slides, okay?
Sure. And I probably will not see the chat button, so please jump in if anybody has any questions and let me know about a particular topic.
Perfect. I can help you keep track of that too.
Okay. All right. So welcome to IEP pre-K through 4th grade. Now we are going to go over everything quickly. This is something that we could spend all day discussing. So I want to kind of take the key points and help you understand the process and how the process starts. I am going to move the pictures. Sorry. Okay, so to get it all started, everything is based with IDEA, so the Individuals with Disabilities Educational Act. This is the law that makes available a free, appropriate public education, which they call FAPE, which acronyms, you will learn them all. Don't be overwhelmed with them. So I'm trying to put them in there to expose you to them. So this is eligible to children with disabilities throughout the nation and ensures special education and related services to those people. This is IDEA governs how state and public agencies provide early intervention, special education, and related services to infants, toddlers, children, and youth with disabilities. So it's a little different for the process for children birth through 2 years old. And I say 2 years old, but some people get confused because it goes up until their 3rd birthday. And that is, you will use the family service plan. Then children 3 through 21, you'll receive services through IDEA Part B. Now, that being said, state laws interpret that document differently. So that's why IEPs look different from state to state. I know as a teacher, I get IEPs from another state and it looks very different. So you can't offer less, but some states offer more than what is required. So that's sometimes why you hear, well, when I was in New York, I got this, or just different from state to state. So they use a different criteria and guidelines, but it's all driven by IDEA. Okay, and so when to seek out an IEP? I get this question a lot. How do we know when we start the process? So upon turning 3 years old, your child will transition from receiving the early intervention services to having an IEP if they are eligible for services. This can get started about 6 months prior to turning 3. You want to be in touch with the district. If your early interventionist hasn't already started that process for you, you can ask them to start it. There is also a child find process, but it is required by local school agencies to identify, locate, and evaluate every child who might have a disability and require special education services. So you can contact your child find person at the district. I'm sure every district has a website, and you can go to that website and search for the child find and call them if your interventionist has not called them already. All right, the evaluation process in determining eligibility. This is where parents can feel very overwhelmed. Before the evaluation and any kind of testing can even take place, the district must have your written consent to proceed. Before you sign it, you should get a copy of the procedural safeguards from the district that explains all your parental rights. And it's called different things in different states. I know here we call it our IEP team. I think someone in Texas said it's called the ARD team. So they will review all the guides to that, and that will all be in the procedural safeguards. So your evaluation team could consist of your school it will consist of the school psychologist, special education teacher, could have speech therapist, occupational therapist, physical therapist, behavioral specialist, school-based autism consultant. Well, that depends district to district because some districts do not have autism consultants. So that is different in each area. So the team will complete an evaluation on the child's needs and abilities. And after that, the team will meet to determine eligibility. So the team has to determine if the child has one of the 13 disabilities that are defined by IDEA, and the impact of the disability must create a need for services. So there must be a discrepancy between performance and ability, limited progress in cognitive areas, evidence of emotional issues, problems with that is affecting their performance. So just because your child has the disability and is diagnosed with that disability does not mean they are automatically going to be eligible. It's not as cut as dry. It really depends on the child, their specific situation. Fortunately, IDEA was written to have that flexibility, but I just don't want you to go into the meeting thinking, okay, we have the diagnosis, we're automatically going to qualify, because it does have to hinder growth. Okay, so a common question, and I'm going to touch on this briefly with the 504 plan because we could have a whole different webinar for 504 plans. So I know that sometimes people don't understand the difference. So I'm going to kind of break down a couple things. So for an IEP, it is required under IDEA. So it's an educational right. Whereas the 504 is under the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, and that is a civil right. So where the IEP is 3 to 21 years old, the 504 plan can go into post-secondary schooling. The IEP is a legal document that has objectives, goals, accommodations, and a description of age upon educational settings. Whereas the 504 plan discusses accommodations, and they don't have to qualify for an IEP, but you might need some accommodations to participate in a general education classroom. So some of these things, if you're wondering what accommodations are, could be in the front of the classroom for optimal seating, could even be an allergy. So you're going to provide a peanut-free environment, providing a child with an extra time, a safe space, technology to address a certain need, talk to text. So it isn't services for special education, it is accommodating them in the general education setting.
Kelly?
Yes.
Question, if a child has an IEP, would they also have a 504 or would everything be included in the IEP?
Everything, there might be cases where you would have both, but I wouldn't see a need because it's accommodations in the 504 and every IEP should list the accommodations. Okay, we can go to the next slide if there's. Okay, so an IEP, we all have heard it. We all get nervous about it. So what is it exactly? It is a written statement for the educational program designed to meet the child's individual need. This is their guidebook to their education. This will allow other new teachers and everyone to see how to best serve your child. Every child who receives special education services must have an IEP. And it's important to remember it is a legal binding document. So everything in there must be followed. And the IDEA lists specific criteria required for every IEP, and we'll try to go through most of those components. And every IEP should be specifically designed by the team for each student. So you shouldn't have, just because the child has the same diagnosis as another one, shouldn't have the same accommodations, shouldn't have the same needs. Each child has their own. And again, they must be held once a year. You have to hold the annual review to design new goals, new present levels. It's important to keep the present levels up to date so you know where the child is currently functioning. All right, parental rights. Per federal law, you must receive a copy of the procedural safeguards. It is that thick book that you get every IEP meeting. You will get it originally. You look at it, don't use it as a coaster. It's got so much important information in it. There are certain times where you have to receive it legally. So that is the initial referral, or once you request an evaluation, and then you must get it every school year before an IEP meeting. And then if you file a complaint, they must provide you with that. And then if a student is removed from his or her current educational placement because of a violation of code of conduct, they must provide it as well. Also, you can ask for it anytime. You can, if you just can't find yours, anytime you want one, you can ask for it. A big thing that I always tell my parents, I always do, teachers always do, is document conversations, because you can have a conversation in car line about a support or a need or a request for a meeting. Always follow up with an email, because you want everything in writing. You want the time you requested a meeting. You want a conversation you discussed about a concern. So always follow up with an email. That's the best way, because it's always in writing. It has the date, but just document all your conversations. Okay, the team members of the IEP team. Special education teacher is on the team. A general education teacher, the law requires one. That being said, students get older, more members of the team could come. Related arts could come, anyone who serves in that general education capacity. Local education agency, or the LEA. It's typically a principal, a vice principal, or a special education supervisor. This person, though, you want them to have great knowledge of the general education services, who can explain to the parent in the district. And then related service provider. So if your child receives occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech, vision services, they will be included in that meeting. And then the school psychologist does not come to every year IEP, but they will come if evaluations are being done, to review test results, or if you request them to come. And just a reminder, you are the most valuable member of the team. You know your child better than anyone else. So you are not going just to listen to what everyone else says. Your input matters. Make sure that you provide it. And my next point, a parent advocate. So it is not a required member, but it's helpful and beneficial to help you navigate the process and for support. So there's a lot of local agencies and some national agencies that can tell you how to get an advocate. And I also tell my parent, they sometimes want to bring grandma or aunts or uncles or other family members. You have the right to bring whoever you want. I know when my daughter went from early intervention to getting an IEP, we brought her early interventionist because she had been with her for 2.5 years. She knew her better than, the evaluator, so she could provide that important information. Just know that the invitation has your name, but you are able to bring other people to support. And then team member excusal. So a team member can't be absent from the meeting unless prior written consent has been given by the parent and the school. So you as a parent have a right to say, no, you want them there. And you can reschedule the meeting. My big rule of thumb is if they are decreasing service or they are changing services in any way, they need to be at that meeting. And so as a parent, it is your right to ask to reschedule and to make it a time where everyone can attend. All right, the present levels. So IDEA states that it must show a child's disability affects the child's involvement and progress in the general education curriculum. For preschool students as appropriate, how the disability affects the child's participation in appropriate activities. So that's a lot of social when you get to the pre-K, and that is a lot of centers. All kinds of different activities that's not necessarily curriculum. You want to see how your child compares to same age peers. So the impact statement is what is the impact of the disability on the student within the school setting. So this can be academically, socially, behaviorally, emotionally, all of these areas can be covered. Present levels, it's statements on how the student performs. It has to be current and up to date. And that's why you require it for at least every year. Because you need that up-to-date information because children grow, they develop, and a year is a long time. So this is really the meat and potatoes of the IEP. This is what's going to drive the rest of the IEP. You're going to list the strengths, the weaknesses, how they learn best. It needs to be objective based and based on data. This can include parent information, assessments, observation, therapy logs. This information is used to generate goals and objectives for the IEP. So goals and objectives. So the goals are the bigger picture. So what are you going to learn? And if your child, some states require objectives, some don't. So if you have objectives on your IEP, it is listing how you are going to get to the goal. So it's breaking it down into smaller parts, how you're going to achieve the big goal. So the goals all come from the needs in the present levels, and they must be appropriate and achievable. The criteria for goals, specific. The goal should be clear, concise, stating what you want the student to accomplish. They must be measurable. It needs to have some metric for progress. It needs a mastery for criteria. So it could be 3 out of 4, 4 out of 5. And it also needs to say if you need visual prompts, verbal prompts. It needs to be achievable. The goal must be challenging, but yet achievable. Setting goals that are too hard will only lead to frustration for the child and the entire team. Relevant, the goal should align with the student's educational needs and goals. And then of course, time bound. So a target date for the student should accomplish the goal. So typically it is by the end of the year. Sometimes when you get into the objectives, they break it down into quarters, but there needs to be a time of when you are proposing the goal to be achieved. Modifications and accommodations. This is probably where I get the most questions to understand the difference between the two. So modifications are changing what they are learning, where accommodations change how they are learning. For modifications, you're changing what is being taught and what is expected to learn. You have to keep in mind when modifications are being provided, you're altering the curriculum. That can impact the placement of the child and also the diploma options. And I think that they'll probably get into that as we get into the older IEPs, but that's something to really think about. And some examples can be alternate curriculum, lower reading levels, modified grades. You're eliminating specific standards, individualized material, and benchmarks. So you can be in a general education classroom and they can have, this is the project, but for your child, it can be modified and adjusted based on their needs. Accommodations is changing how they are learning. It allows allowances in how a student is learning or being evaluated. This doesn't change what they're expected to know. It's just helping them have access to the curriculum. So it can be a variety of different things. And I kind of broke it down into a couple different areas. So presentation, visual cues, large print, audiobooks, Braille. So response, they can use augmentative communication, scribe, seating, preferential seating, proximity to teacher, different settings, sensory tools. So if they need to take quizzes in a small group, if they need to take it individually, all of these things, it's not changing what they are learning, it's just changing how they were learning. And time and scheduling, I know we've probably all seen the extended time and providing breaks. So that is the difference between accommodations and modifications. All right, the least restrictive environment. This one is, it's important to know, it isn't a place. It is a principle that guides the child's educational program. The LRE for each child may look completely different because kids are unique and not everyone needs the same thing. Packages for supports include elements of the setting, materials, accommodation, and personnel. So that being said, the setting, that is the place, but that's not all of the LRE. It is the principle that guides the program, and all learners should have access to meaningful education. And prior written notice. So IDEA requires that notice must be given to parents after a meeting. The statement after the meeting and prior to implementation. So you should receive a copy of your IEP, and the copy should have the prior written notice. In the prior written notice, it's saying the decisions that were decided. It is talking about all changes that will take place. Before that decision is acted on, you will have notice of exactly what is taking place. It is important to know that you should not receive your prior written notice before the IEP meeting. That is suggesting that the team made a predetermination, and that is a violation of rights. So parent input, this is really, really important. This touches me on a personal level and as a teacher. Your voice needs to be heard. Being in a meeting is overwhelming and emotional. You were talking about your child. This is your baby. It starts to be very raw when you're talking about the strengths and especially the struggles. It is very real and it's very emotional, especially when you're talking about their struggles, because as a parent, you want to protect your child. You don't want to put out all of their needs. So what I do as a teacher before the meeting, I send home a parent input form. I have, do you have any questions? What do you view their strengths, their needs, any concerns about what's going on, any recent struggles? The list can go on. And I think I provided that to Jeff so we can get everybody a copy of that. It's just something, it's a great guide for parents to look and be like, okay, I'm going to take the time, fill it out, look at where my child is and where I view my child is. So I get that sent to me, and that drives my IEP, because I look at, is the student generalizing skills from home to school? Sometimes I get it back and I'm like, wow, this child is doing this at home. That's amazing. And sometimes I get it back and this child is struggling here. So we're seeing how we can work together. And another thing that I like about that is because in the moment when you come to the meeting, it's hard for the parent to be able to provide that information because they're just being overwhelmed with a lot of knowledge, a lot of information about tests and assessments and results that they're not always able to put their emotions behind and relay all that information. So this gives them a starting point. It gives the teacher a chance to really let the parent's voice be heard. As a parent, I request a draft copy of the IEP prior to the meeting. Print it out, I review it, I make notes. I probably make way too many notes. I can't help it. But then for each section, I'm able, when they're talking about it, I've already heard it. So one, it takes a little bit of the emotion out of it because you've heard it, you're prepared for it. So now you can see, okay, now how can I help my child? And then so I bring all that, and then I'm able to participate in the meeting. You can also provide a vision statement for your child and what your vision is for your child, and kind of look at how you guys can get there. I like to bring notes to meetings, and I think it's important for parents to bring notes and any questions, because again, when you're in that meeting, it is so easy to forget questions you had or concerns you have when you are provided with so much information. So, and I think it is very important to remember that the IEP is a fluid document. It does not have to be the IEP all year. I have had students who have met that goal in half of a year, and it's like, wow, we need to meet and let's change this. And or I've had students on the other end who have had illnesses that have caused them to regress. So we are looking at how we can meet their current needs. It can always be changed and always amended. If you see something's not working and an accommodation needs to be added, you can add that. If you see, wow, they can spend more time in gen ed or whatever, you can always amend it. You as the parent can request an IEP at any time during the year. I might be getting some emails from teachers if you request them every week, but you can. So you have that right to request a meeting anytime you would like.
I think that's the end of the slide.
It is.
Awesome. That was really helpful. I always learn, even after having gone through so many IEP meetings, I always pick up, such great tips every time we have these conversations. And one of the things, Kelly, that really stood out to me, and I just think about even in my own experiences, is really two things about all kids being unique, and then you as the parent feeling like you can speak up and be that advocate for your child. And I think sometimes also it's easy to compare yourself to other kids, or compare your IEP to another child's IEP. And I think, what you were saying, these are all great tips and guidance, but then at the end of the day, you know your child best. And so being prepared to advocate and share that, I think, is really, really, really good advice. And I think, what you were saying about the curriculums, that was a decision my husband and I had to make with our son. Is we did decide to put him on a modified curriculum. And that was a huge decision, but ultimately we felt like was in the best interest of our child. And so sometimes we just have to make those hard decisions because in our heart and our gut, we know that's the best thing for them. So I love everything you said. I thought it was really valuable. Let's see, I was going to jump into some parent questions, and a lot of it you talked about. We talked about being more engaged in the IEPs, but one thing I think that's really good on here is, how do you recommend a parent their own keep track of the IEP and the progress toward the goal, so they know when to call a meeting?
Mm-hmm. So I think it's also important. We as special needs parents always assume that every meeting has to be an IEP meeting. So I always tell my parents, we can have just a parent-teacher informal conference that we just are discussing progress. We are discussing things that work at school. And I love to show my parents what they're doing. So those kind of meetings are okay to schedule. It doesn't have to be an IEP meeting. But as far as supporting at home, I like to provide my parents, and this is something that you can request. If your child uses visual supports at school, ask for a copy of those at home. So if your child needs first then, if your child needs different things to participate, then they'll probably need those at home as well. So the struggles at school will also be the struggles at home in a community setting. So those are good things. Any tools that they use, and then taking each goal and seeing things that you can work on at home. And it's a little different at the preschool level than when you start getting into the older levels, because the preschool level, it's a lot of fun and it's a lot of play and it's play-based learning. So you can do a lot of that at home. It's when you start getting into the harder math and the harder reading that makes it a little bit more challenging. But I always tell parents, do not hesitate to ask what we use at school and ask for those at home, especially the visual supports.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Another question we got in here that I thought was really relevant in the chat is, what do you do and how do you handle it if you feel like they're not in compliance with the IEP? So that maybe they're not in the IEP compliance. What are the next steps that a parent should go through?
I'm sorry, you faded out for a second.
Oh, sorry. What should a parent do if they believe that the school is not in compliance with the IEP?
I would contact the teacher and the LEA and ask for documentation that services, accommodations, and everything is being provided. It's a little bit challenging because that gets into they say they're doing it, you feel that they're not. I feel like most of the schools are opened up now for observations for parents. I know for a while we couldn't do that, but schools are starting to open up. I always tell parents, and I do it as myself, the squeaky wheel gets the oil, or whatever that saying is the more you ask, the more you make sure. Don't ever be afraid to ask the question to make sure your child is getting those services. Be present, be there, let them see you, let them know like you are making sure that they are being served. And if you feel like they're not being served, contact the director of special services. For that, it just depends. If you're a bigger district, they're probably based in preschool, elementary, middle, and high. If you are a smaller district, you just might have one director of special services.
Kelly and Casey, one thing Haley, the president of SETBP1, wanted to mention that she thinks you're doing a great job, Kelly, but also she wanted to say that she thinks it's a good recommendation to not go into an IEP meeting without a support person with you. Kelly mentioned you can invite anyone. The support person could be a spouse, a friend, or anyone that you feel comfortable with, but just how important that is in this setting.
Yeah, that's good.
Thank you for stressing that again. I think it is very valuable.
Agreed. What about also another question that came in through the chat, and then we'll jump back to a few more that I have in my document here. Do you recommend home instruction in case of not providing one-on-one for a Kleefstra kid with autism who is severely delayed? So maybe supplementing some things at home.
I am a strong believer that if you can get the services at home and you can qualify for them, take advantage of it. My daughter goes to school for a half a day, and then she also gets ABA services at home. For us, she could go somewhere to get the services, but we prefer for our family for her to do it in the house so she can generalize the skills in the house in her natural environment.
Yeah, that's great. Also, when someone, so let's think about, our families or friends on the call who maybe they're just entering this process, right? So their kid maybe isn't even 3, right? They're starting kind of that earlier intervention. Do they need a referral to get into that? So do they need like their pediatrician to make a referral? Can they refer themselves? How does the entry point work?
So each state, in South Carolina, we have BabyNet, which is our early intervention program, and every state has an early intervention program. You do not, as far as I know, you do not need the physician because at 4 months, we had the option to either get our physician or to call yourself. You or any family member may refer them.
Okay, and that's great. And then one of the questions that came in from our families is their child, they have been advised that their child doesn't meet the criteria for resources, and they're feeling very frustrated that she's going to start to fall behind. Do they have any resources to get assistance?
There's a couple options. So if the child has the disability and they are currently on level, you can look to get the accommodations in place through a 504 plan based on the disability if there are barriers to the general education setting. You can go off and do your own evaluation. You can request that the district pays for it, but they don't have to, which can be pricey, but you can do that. And then you bring it back and they don't necessarily have to take it. That being said, it would be helpful for me to probably know more information about the child and their specific needs. So whoever that question came from, they are welcome to contact me, and we can kind of look at things and see where they could go.
Perfect. That's really kind. So maybe we can put the general inbox to Ashley for our foundation, and then forward that on to Kelly, and then they can take it offline. But I appreciate your willingness, Kelly, to do that. It's really kind.
Yes.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about, and it kind of goes along these lines a little bit. The child has KdVS, and they're unable to get him qualified for physical therapy. And I remember this, and I would love to hear the specifics, because I feel like I remember this with my own child, where even though we personally felt like he could use it, are there things in terms of like if you can move about the classroom safely, or where maybe it's harder to qualify? Can you kind of speak to some of that, and especially related to physical therapy?
Physical therapy, can they access the school environment? Can they access all parts of the school? If they can do that, then that is not affecting their education. However, I understand, because with my daughter, I know she does not, she's currently, we faded to consult. So I understand that, and I feel that. However, I will say that it is based on accessing the school environment in a school setting. That being said, that does not mean that they could not get outside physical therapy, a prescription from their doctor.
Yeah, that's a great point, because I think, that's just helping find resources. What can we get in the school? And then what are some of those things that we have to supplement outside of school? So I appreciate.
And with physical therapy, it's one of those things as well that it doesn't stand alone. So if there are needs, like you can get accommodations in a 504 plan, whereas speech language delay can stand alone, autism can stand alone, just a physical disability could not stand alone, if that makes sense. So it would require a 504.
Okay, that's really helpful. Another thing that came in, so specific to the SETBP1 community, what was mentioned is that they're facing, and it's probably the same for all of us, the difficulty around getting a one-on-one teacher's aide or even a shared teacher's aide. So can you talk about, I know we have this in our IEP, so I'm assuming, it would be a part of an IEP, and how do you get that type of support if they qualify?
So you would have to prove, just with any services, that it is needed. So data would need to be collected. You would need to, you could ask the teacher, you could ask the team, I want data on how my child does without that, and then how they do with it. It's one of those tricky situations that, again, the criteria is different state to state. It's different district to district of what's required. I know that from a teacher perspective, I want that for my daughter. I want that extra support. But I also know from a teacher's perspective that it is important to, at some point, have a plan for fading, because you do not want your child person dependent, prompt dependent. That being said, that might be 10 years down the road, but depending on the child and their needs. But yes, documentation to show that it does affect them, their education, would be needed, which you would need to show the difference between the two. Data drives everything.
Yeah, and it was also mentioned that, that in a lot of cases is what makes or breaks the ability to also have that inclusion in the classroom, is being able to have that teacher's aide. So that I thought was a good thing too. How does a family find the right balance between staying in the classroom and then in some situations maybe being pulled out of the classroom? Do you have any guidance or advice around that?
Well, I will say, if that is preventing them from being in the general education classroom, then that is directly affecting their education.
Okay, that's good to know.
So if it's purely based on that, that is affecting it. If it is just helpful for them, then that's different. And I say that because obviously it's helpful. But I say that if it is just an extra support, if it is necessary for them to participate in the general education classroom, then it should be necessary.
No, that's really helpful. That Ashley, I know those were the main questions I had on my list. I think you might have a couple on your list or some that have popped up, and we've got, it looks like, a few minutes to ask them. So do you want to unmute and share?
Yes, thank you. Yes, we did have a few others that were sent in. Kelly, can you talk about IDEA and IEPs in relation to charter schools and private schools?
I can touch on it. I have not taught in a private school. I do know that that is all driven by funding. They do receive small funds from the federal government for special education services. However, it's not much. So they are not legally required to follow the same guidelines that public education is, because IDEA is based on free and appropriate public education.
Thank you. Can you touch a little bit more on the types of things you can request for your child? I mean, I know like we do speech therapy, OT, PT, and then, you know, we have like special pull-up, like Handwriting Without Tears. I mean, it seems like there's a lot of opportunities. And I think I feel like sometimes that the team kind of holds them back versus I wish there was a table full of all the ideas that we could do and see which ones worked. Can you kind of touch on a little bit all the different ideas?
Well, one of the things you mentioned is Handwriting Without Tears, and that is a curriculum. So I guess if that is offered, it is probably a curriculum purchased by your district. It's great curriculum. But accommodations, as far as that, it's tough to just pinpoint one because it just is all dependent on your child. You can offer, they can have adults for transitions. You can do first then schedules. You can do augmentative communication. I just feel that I would have to know the child to know what to request, because honestly, those kind of things, I mean, there's thousands of things that you could list, and I would have to know the child to make those suggestions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Another thing that came up was extended school year, and how does that apply?
Sure. Extended school year is, it's a touchy subject because you think all students would benefit from continuing the education. But there's the criteria list of questions that you go through. Was there a lot of absences? Was there significant regression? Was skills maintained? Was it tough to maintain after break? So I know that in our district, we take data after spring break, after Christmas break, and all those things to see if the child was able to maintain the skills. You also have to give them a grace period of the first day, because all kids adjusting back to being in school. But you also, an important thing to think about with extended school year is if your child has a tough time with transitions, it's not always going to be the same teacher, and it's not always going to be the same location. So that's just something to think about. I know my daughter has a hard time with new people. So would the extended school year really benefit her, or would she spend that time adjusting to the new person? But yeah, extended school year is a complex topic that probably could be another webinar.
Thank you for that. Our last question comes from talking about the general education setting versus a self-contained classroom. And can you kind of describe those two scenarios and how they play out?
I can, but I can also say that what the special education setting looks like in my district is probably very different than what it looks like in your district. And I try not to say, and I said it's setting, because it's more of where you're receiving your services and the type of services you're receiving. Whereas the general education classroom, if you need more support, you go in there. Ideally, you want every child to be in general education, but that's not appropriate for all children. So it's another one of those topics that it is hard to discuss without specifically knowing the child. It can be different curriculums. There's different quote unquote self-contained settings. And so each one of those settings looks different at each level, at the preschool level, at the elementary level, across districts, across states. I just know that the most time in general education you can do is the goal.
Great, thank you. That wraps up all the additional questions that we had.
Perfect. Oh, it looks like maybe one more thing came in. Let's make sure. Nope. Okay. Great. Okay, so I think we have hit all the questions. Families, you sent so many good ones, so thank you for doing that. And Kelly, gosh, thank you. This is amazing information. So really appreciate you taking time on this Saturday to share with us. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
And you would never know you don't like public speaking because you were awesome.
Not at all.
You have a knack for it more than you're giving yourself credit, I think. So given this is all the time we have, we just want to, again, thank all of you for attending. We're really grateful that you've taken time out to do so. This is an important topic for all of us as we think about how to best advocate for our kids and our friends and our loved ones. So thank you. We plan to have another event for 5th through 12th grade. So we'll be learning about IEPs for that age group on June 4th. You can register for these calls on the KdVS Foundation website, kdvsfoundation.org, to learn more about the website. You can also go to our website to learn more about these amazing 3 organizations that have partnered together for It Takes a Village. So we would welcome that. We look forward to connecting with each of you again soon and hope that you have a wonderful weekend. So thanks again, and happy Mother's Day to all those mothers out there.
Same to you.
Bye.
Thank you.